Hello everyone, it's manga time. I want to talk about one of my current favourite manga. I'm not sure how well known it is, so maybe there's a little discovery there for some of you. The manga, what I call a magical manga, is Magus of the Library. And on the back it says, the magic of the written word. So what do I mean by a magical manga? Is it like Witch Hat Atelier, which is all about magic? No, that's not what I mean, although there is magic in this story as well. I mean by magical that it takes you on a magical carpet ride into a fantasy world that satisfies that craving for a magical experience. I was brought up as a child with books being my first gateway into stories and the world of fantastical adventures, and I never looked back. I've talked about this in a quite older video some time ago now about what kind of books I read in my childhood. I just briefly want to revisit this because this manga gives me a feeling, more than any other manga I've read, of entering back into that childhood experience of first picking up a book and walking into a different world. Most of you will remember walking into a wardrobe and on the other side you were suddenly in the land of Narnia. You might remember sailing on the high seas with pirates, having adventures, finding treasure, Treasure Island or Peter Pan. I also had Mutiny on the Bounty. That was one of my childhood books, and I did love the illustrations. Then there were fairy tales, all sorts, but of course in Germany especially, we had Grimm's fairy tales, absolute classic. And they frightened the heck out of me. You could say first experience with horror, just read Grimm's fairy tales. I became a castaway with Robinson Crusoe. I rafted down the Mississippi River with Huckleberry Finn and the escaped slave Jim. And my very early interest in Native Americans, we used to call them American Indians back then, was a book my parents got me by James Fenimore Cooper, a classic of American literature. And that is the complete set of all 5 novels called The Leatherstocking Tales. I have read this book so many times, it's unbelievable. The Last Mohican. And of course it had fantastic illustrations. Illustrations, I soon found out, were the key to extra deep immersion. And that's of course where manga has a huge advantage. So this is exactly the feeling I get when I dive into Magus of the Library, because the whole world is based on the idea that books are the most important thing. Printed media are powerful, and whoever controls them controls the fate of that world. Now that sounds rather abstract, and in a way this story is full of concepts and ideas, so I would say it might not be a story that would suit everyone. I don't think so, but I think some of you will definitely find it interesting and intriguing, and what helps is the gorgeous artwork. Magus of the Library draws on a whole range of different cultures. It's of course fantasy, but it draws heavily on Middle Eastern and Eastern culture, India, China, but probably predominantly Middle Eastern. And that gives it a very rich, ornamental flavour that I just adore. So what's the story about? Well, it is about a little boy growing up in a tiny village somewhere in the backwoods, and he's different from everybody else. There are a whole variety of different, as they're called, races, because they're fantasy people. So some have furry ears or horns or tails or different critters altogether from humans. So we have different races and different peoples. And our little protagonist, Theo, is a mixture of two different races. One of them are people who were oppressed. They were not tolerated and excluded from the other countries and cultures, and he's suffering a lot of bullying and abuse where he's living. He's very poor. He only has a sister who brings him up. But the one thing Theo loves above all, where he finds a refuge, is in books. Of course, he can't afford books. Very few people can in that world. That's why there are libraries. Libraries are all important in this story. So I'm just telling you the outline. I don't want to give too much away, because one of the great joys of this story is the world building. It is very deep and extraordinary. Now, Theo dreams, of course, as all children do, of being an adventurer, going on an adventure, discovering new places, finding riches, learning lots of things along the way. And we soon realise that Theo is not going to be stuck in that village for very long. This is an adventure story, and we are definitely going on an adventure. This story is based around a lot of information about books, the written word, the back history of the cultures of this continent. So quite a few of the panels are fairly static. Now that sounds like it might be boring and you might fall asleep, but trust me, you don't, because there's always action in between. And the author is actually very good at conveying motion, sudden movement, action. And one day, the almost impossible happens. They have a group of Kafna visiting the village. What's a Kafna? A Kafna is a librarian, and librarians are incredibly important and very powerful in this world. And Theo meets them, and he forms a bond with one of the Kafna women. They often are women, although men can also be Kafna. And you see here, when the Kafna leave, she says, "Let us meet again, my new adventurer friend." And that, of course, is the beginning of it all. So the first volume covers Theo's life in the village, his background, his struggles there, and then his life-changing meeting with the Kafna. Now, if you have a look at the bottom of the book cover, it says underneath the title Magus of the Library by Mitsu Izumi, based on Kafna of the Wind by Sophie Schwimm, translated by Hiroto Hamada. And when I got this first volume and I saw this, I thought, this is odd. Is this not an original manga? Is it based on another book by someone called Sophie Schwim? Well, I soon found out, of course, that that is not the case. This is a clever device by the author. You probably know other books that pretend to be found literature, like some researcher finds an old manuscript and then the whole story is based on what's told in the manuscript, something like that, a sort of framing device. It's often used like that. It's a bit of a meta device because we are being told that there is a mysterious book by a Sophie Schwim called Kafna of the Wind, and it allows us to enter this world, to believe it to be authentic, and it works. And you find out more slowly throughout the story about the whole variety of texts that are important in this world, but also, of course, about this mysterious tome. So who is Mitsu Izumi? I didn't know her before I started reading Magus of the Library, so let's have a quick look at her career. It's hard to find a lot of information about her. It's very brief. I just found that she is listed as the creator of many shorter manga, so probably published in a variety of Japanese magazines. But this is the important thing. Her first serialized manga was an adaptation of a popular and very beautiful anime called Anohana, the flower we saw that day. So that was about 10 years or so ago. And then she wrote an original series of manga that was published by Viz Media, and it's called Seventh Garden. And I haven't read it, so I don't know it. I only know that there was a slight problem with the publication because 8 volumes came out as physical books, and then the publisher must have decided they didn't want to continue and they were just going to do it digitally on their website, but nothing further ever appeared. So that's a bit of an unfortunate story. I am very happy to see that this is being published by Kodansha. Now, there are obviously various manga publishers I have come across so far. Kodansha would rate as one of my favourite ones because whichever manga I've had of theirs has been published to what I consider very good standards. Magus of the Library is of a generous size. It has beautiful front and back covers. The paper is good quality and doesn't smell like it's been dumped in 1,000 chemical vats. But the really, really important thing, of course, is the artwork. Okay, I've never seen the original artwork, of course, but it looks to me like they've taken great pains to honour what the artist was doing. The print quality to me looks very good. Mitsu Izumi works with a lot of shading, highlighting, etc., which can of course be difficult. Plus, the detail in her panels is just mind-blowing. I think she excels at showing environments. She captures the world and she does not skimp on details. It's like one of those illustrations from my childhood books where I just feel like I want to walk straight into that scene, like you can pop through a picture frame and, into the book itself. You can see even smaller panels hold an extraordinary amount of detail. And libraries are always incredibly important. So Volume 2 covers Theo's struggles and endeavours as he tries to prepare for taking the entrance exam to become a Kafna, his big dream. That's, of course, very difficult for a poor little boy from the backwoods. His sister manages to save up a whole year's worth of earnings to make it possible for him to go and to register for the exam. So that's Volume 2, including his journey to Afzak, the library capital, where the central library is located. So it sounds like it's quite a slow-moving story, and I would have to say yes, but also no. Most of the volumes have 250 to 300 pages. This is not a story where you'll read through one manga volume in a couple of afternoons. I don't think so, unless your afternoons are particularly long, because of the amount of detail, both in artwork and in information. The manga is rated T for teens, age 13 upwards, and that's probably about right. I would say a child age 12 who's a very good reader would certainly be fine coping with it, but it is definitely for those who love the written word and are not worried about having a lot of them on the page. So it is slow-moving in one sense, but it's always punctuated by sudden bursts of action. Things happen, exciting things, and she's very good at also portraying those. The pace accelerates and you get carried along and then into the next calmer water, where you learn more yet again about how manuscripts are made, how they're printed, how they are repaired and maintained, how the libraries work, and it's all fascinating stuff. So Volume 3 is a very important one. This is where a lot of the themes of this manga become really very clear. The story itself is concerned with Theo taking the entrance exam to become a Kafna. That's what the whole 300 pages is about, and I assure you it is not boring, not for 1 minute. This is one fascinating exam. But what also became very clear in this volume for me was that Mitsu Izumi is not afraid to spell out the message of what she is writing about. And I would say on one level that's probably very suitable, especially for the age group it's probably aimed at. So from younger teens upwards. Here's an example of one of those pages which is chocker with information about written documents and printed documents. Here is a full double page just showing the lively city of Afzak, various scenes, so you get a very good impression. A part of the story in this third volume is about Theo meeting a very old woman. Old women can be very important. And it gives us a hint of what might lie in wait for his future, what his fate might be, in other words. Because Theo, of course, is a very special young boy. That goes without saying for a fantasy story. Now, there are certain texts in this culture which are deemed to be so important they have a special status. And one of these is called the Black Text. It is a book that endeavours to present an academic argument that the Haupi people are an inferior race. Now, Theo himself is part Haupi, And I won't mention any more, but you can see one of the big themes throughout the story is racial diversity, tolerance and intolerance. How do you deal with it? This is a lovely picture showing Theo on top of a stack of books, conquering the world by reading. How books open up the world and will equip you for dealing with what the world throws at you. And here is a lovely picture of Theo's village called Amun, where he returns, of course, after the exam. So I'm currently reading volume 4, and I'm not giving anything further away. I've already talked more about the story than I've probably done in other videos. I feel it's important to give you an idea of what to expect if you decide to pick up this manga. And honestly, whatever I've told you of the story is just the bare bones. It's all in the detail. And I just have to mention this little detail. You know me and dragons. Are there dragons in the story? Well, I'm happy to report, yes, there is a dragon-type race. They can speak, they are quite something, and you can ride on the dragons. Awesome. They have this little contraption that they strap on their backs, and the humans can lie inside that and be carried over great distances. So it's got the dragon factor. After volume 4, I have volume 5 to read and volume 6. And that's it so far. You can see why I am pacing myself. It's very difficult. Once you start a volume, it's very hard to put it down and, have a little pause or something. But I need to make you aware that it is in the process of being written and published. We are waiting for volume 7. It has been announced for sometime next year. It is available for pre-order. And I would say there's roughly every 10 to 12 months there's one volume. I am not surprised, and I wouldn't want Mitsuizumi to rush it. Once you see the amount of drawing detail in the manga, you realize that this is not a quick job. All I hope is that she continues to write the story and that Kodansha keep publishing it. I have the feeling that she has a very clear idea of where Theo's life story is heading, where it's going. There's lots of mysteries yet to uncover, clearly, and there should be a fair number of volumes ahead. I'm hoping. I'm along for the magic carpet ride. As long as it's there, whatever gets published, I'm grateful to have it. So let me know if this is a manga you might be interested in, or have you already discovered it and are already a fan? I know what many of you will ask me. I'm sort of telepathically anticipating this question. Is it as good as Witch Hat Atelier? I feel that's the wrong question to ask, because it's very, very different. Witch Hat Atelier to me is such an outstanding manga. There's not many that come along like that in a decade, let's put it like that. To try and compare everything else to that is somehow not going to work. I think Magus of the Library is a good, even an excellent manga, but I've tried to show you a bit of the story and the world and why it will appeal to certain people, but possibly not others. And accordingly, you will either love it, even with its very small faults, or you won't be interested. I'm just really happy that a story of this caliber exists to maybe draw young readers into discovering a fantasy world the way I did 60 years ago, because these things really don't change, you know. And I think it's a bonus that it has a very strong message, but I've already noticed in Volume 3 and now in Volume 4 even more that while she keeps it pretty clear-cut and understandable for younger readers, she's not trying to simplify the issues. In fact, I can see a lot of complexity and ambivalent moral and ethical issues arising, and I have no doubt she will deal with that. I can see what she's doing, and she's doing it with such enthusiasm and conviction. I just love Magus of the Library, and its beautiful and rich Middle Eastern-inspired world. I think Mitsu Izumi has done something quite unusual with this manga series. I would go so far as to say, looking at all the manga I've read so far, there are certain traditional traits that most manga share, but Magus of the Library is unique. That's the only word I can find for it. It took me completely by surprise when I started it. I haven't read a manga quite like it. If you get a chance and you think you might like it, please do try it. Let me know how you get on. Thank you very much for listening to my ramblings about a magical manga world. Who or what is the Magus of the Library? I'm not telling you. You'll have to read it to find out. As always, please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye. And my t-shirt today is... Yes, I'm sure most of you anime fans will recognize it.